Underage drinking, drunk driving, and teenage alcoholism are all problems in the spotlight right now because they're behind so many tragedies.
Tonight, 18 News begins a three-part series on underage drinking with a close look at one of those tragedies. Mike Taylor is with us now for part one of Under the Influence. Mike?
This evening, you'll hear the story of Melinda Lighter. But first, I want to say the purpose of this story is not to gain your sympathy or in any way justify what Melinda Lighter did. The purpose is to tell her story and hope that someone out there will realize how easy it is to go from having fun to ruining a lot of lives. April 4th, 1988. 20-year-old Melinda Lighter, a University of Louisville student, her longtime friend, 21-year-old Michelle Magruder, and 21-year-old Tonia King, an Eastern student, decided they had no interest in watching the NCAA basketball finals with their boyfriends. They left the Richmond apartments where Lighter's boyfriend lived. She drove her 1980 Toyota Corolla. Lighter says the three women spent the evening drinking beer and playing pool at T. Bombadil's in 1890s, two downtown Richmond bars. Shortly after 11 p.m., the three women got back in Lighter's car with Melinda still driving. By this time, she had a blood alcohol level of .22, more than twice the legal limit for driving. Traveling more than 45 miles an hour down North 2nd Street, she drove off the road into a telephone pole. This is what was left of the car. King died at the scene. Magruder died an hour later at the hospital. Lighter was charged with murder.
Having a good time and everything, that's fine. But you should be able to control yourself and be responsible about it. And a lot of people don't understand that, and it's hard for a lot of people, especially my age.
Melinda Lighter learned her lesson the hard way. She entered a guilty plea to a lesser charge of reckless homicide. She's dealt with the emotional trauma for a year and continues to see a psychiatrist. After only 80 days, Madison Circuit Judge James Chenault granted her shock probation, a period of time that he says some will think is too short.
I think that it'd be a good thing for you, and I think it'd be a good thing for students at both University of Louisville and Eastern Kentucky University for you to tell your experience. How a night of jollity and frivolity turned into a nightmare like that. And I think that'll better serve the public's ends than to extend the incarceration any further.
Back in Louisville now, Lighter hopes to finish her marketing degree at U of L and someday make a lot of money. But for now, her focus is on rebuilding her life and her hopes of delivering a powerful message to young people during her hours of community service.
I think that it'll maybe only touch a few people, but one person being touched is a lot better than no one being touched.
Lighter will be back in court soon. The parents of King and Magruder have filed suit for mental and physical pain and suffering, as well as expenses and damages. So for all of the people involved, simply getting on with their lives is never easy.
A lot of people had a big problem when Judge Chenault granted her shock probation after 80 days. For example, Brad Shipman is still serving a sentence for his manslaughter conviction.
He had some really interesting comments. Of course, it went on for a long time. There's no way I could show you all of it, but he talked about how, even 100 years in prison would certainly not pay for the girl's lives.
The judge.
The judge did. And, but that it was his responsibility to get her back out into society.
What's coming up tomorrow?
Tomorrow we'll take a look at how easy it is for someone who's underage to get alcohol.
All right, thanks, Mike. Well, Alan's around the corner with all the latest. The majority of teenage boys start drinking before high school. The average age for a first real drink is 12. Now, if those figures surprise you, you may also wonder how underage drinkers come by alcohol so easily, even though it's illegal. Mike Taylor asked that same question in part 2 of his series, Under the Influence.
As a test, I asked 21-year-old Angie Willis, an Eastern student, to help. The object was to go to 10 random Central Kentucky liquor stores to find out how cautious they would be before selling her beer. Let me stress that none of the stores did anything illegal. We simply wanted to see how many would check for identification. This store is one of 2 that refused to sell to her without an ID. A third asked for an ID, but decided they would sell to her anyway. The final store not only did not ask for an ID, but when she told them she was short on cash, 3 male employees bought her a 6-pack. If you live on a college campus, liquor stores are far from the only way to get alcohol, even if you're underage, as I found out when I talked to University of Kentucky students.
I just think that everyone likes to go out and drink this time. I mean, I think they don't really think that it's illegal or anything, because it seems everyone does it. It's almost like it's not.
I think it's a pretty popular belief that, you know, if you're 18, you're old enough to vote, you should be old enough to drink. I'm not sure that's the correct way to view it. I know I did when I was young, underage.
Well, I think that they just find their ways to get it, and because everybody else drinks, and, you know, if they're going to go out at night, they're going to drink.
It's more of a party atmosphere.
Do you think there's anything that would change that attitude?
Maybe stricter penalties of being caught with possession, maybe in the dorm rooms, because a lot of those policies are lax.
Good morning, Alcoholic Beverage Control.
The people charged with enforcing the legal drinking age are based here, in the Alcoholic Beverage Control Board offices in Frankfort. There are more than 5,200 outlets licensed to sell alcohol in Kentucky, and only 26 enforcement officers. Add to that the new, more sophisticated fake IDs, and Catherine Stabe of the ABC says they can only stab at the problem. But the real problems, she believes, are attitudes and ethics.
A lot of the penalties imposed on minors who are violating the law, and a lot of them we're talking about people between the age of 18 and 20, so they are for other purposes adults. You know, we're saying you are an adult except for the purchase of this beverage, and they're getting slaps on the wrist.
Both officials and students admit that although getting tougher might make some people think twice, it's certainly not going to stop underage drinking. Mike Taylor, 18 News.
And if we can stop underage drinking, how do we fight it? Tomorrow in the final segment of Under the Influence, we'll hear some suggestions. Alan's up next with all the sports, and he's going.
If your child has a drinking problem, your child, how should you handle it? And what can you do to head off the problem altogether?
Mike Taylor is here to wrap up his series, Under the Influence, with some important advice.
If you're a parent, we'll deal with 2 areas you'll be interested in tonight. In a moment, a program designed to help our kids deal with alcohol and drugs early. But first, we'll hear from a father whose son has already fallen into the trap. One estimate puts the number of problem drinkers between ages 14 and 17 at 4.5 million kids. This Central Kentucky man's son is one of them.
What was the most difficult thing for you as a parent?
Acceptance. Accepting the fact that my child would and did use and abuse drugs and alcohol. That was the hardest thing to come about, because it was really a blow on my ego as a father, not to be able to direct my child in the right direction. I could not handle him because of the drug use, and I didn't understand that.
There are a number of programs for families with teens on alcohol or drugs. This family chose Charter Ridge Hospital. What they received here was a 4-step program involving an assessment of the problem, therapy, re-entry into the family, and aftercare or support. But don't get the idea it's as simple as 1, 2, 3, 4.
It's a chronic problem that has to be maintained and looked at and evaluated constantly. It's not easy and it's not simple, and it involves working the rest of your life if you want to stay sober.
What could happen here? What are some consequences that could result from? They might tease her.
This is the Drug Abuse Resistance Education, or DARE class, at Mill Creek Elementary. The hope is to catch these 6th graders before they have a problem.
We're going to have to make a decision about whether or not to use drugs, including cigarettes, alcohol, marijuana, or another drug. And it's just inevitable that they're going to have to make it. They're going to have an opportunity to take these drugs. And I think if we can give them the information to make good decisions, then it'll be up to them, because they're going to be the ones making the decisions, not us.
Whether this approach will work long-term, only time will tell. But I'll let the short-term results speak for themselves.
Well, you shouldn't use drugs because it could really hurt you. And people that use them, they aren't really your friends, and they're foolish for doing it.
I've learned the kinds of pressure and how to handle pressure and how to handle risk.
What is the most important thing you've learned out of the DARE program?
Why I shouldn't take drugs, because, you know, they can hurt me or kill me.
What can you do as a parent? Here are a few suggestions from national magazines dealing with the family. First, supervise parties. Don't allow alcohol. Compare notes with other parents. Talk with your kids. Notice changes in their behavior and react. Offer pickup service. Tell them to call if they need a sober driver. Make them face the problem. If they get drunk, don't make excuses for them. But most of all, be a good role model, and whatever you do, don't serve alcohol to teens.
So start talking with your children when they are young, and if you believe there's a problem, get help.
Mike, you've had a lot of good information that I think we can all use in your series. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thanks, Mike. Alan's up next with a special story from Keeneland, a legend, Bill Shoemaker.
Keeneland fans today saw Shoe ride there for probably the last time. We'll have Shoe's ride and a special treat from inside the jockey's room.